On the eve of our wedding, my fiancée was tangled up with her young assistant. The girl I'd loved for 10 years now only had eyes for someone else. Love arrived like a thunderstorm, but it vanished without a sound. I used to fight, to lose control. I'd do anything to test Nancy's love for me. But this time, I cut up the tuxedo and called off the wedding. I chose to let go and let them be, and sent them a parting gift. After the car crash, a bystander took me to the hospital. As the nurse was dressing my wounds, a picture popped up on my phone. The background was also a hospital room. But unlike me, all alone and forgotten, the person in the photo had company. A familiar, blurry profile. Beautiful eyes filled with a deep affection and worry. A text followed. When someone loves you, even a little scratch will make her nervous. Let her go, man. Don't waste your life and end up with nothing. The message was deleted a moment later. I stared at my phone, my brow furrowed. Nancy had spoiled Gavin so rotten he was practically rubbing it in my face. Seeing my expression, the nurse's touch became even gentler. You're incredibly lucky, all things considered, she said, trying to comfort me. The car was totaled, but you just have a few scrapes. With a crash this bad, you didn't call any family? I gave a bitter smile. Family? After the wreck, Nancy left me at the scene and rushed her assistant to the hospital. Before she left, she hung up on my call for help and warned me not to make a scene. Otherwise, the news would be bad for both our families' reputations. Even my own family, when they heard I'd been hit, just kept trying to persuade me. If Nancy doesn't want to make a fuss, it means she still wants to get married. Don't be an idiot and tank both our family stocks. So, does that even count as family? I took a cab home. The moment I walked in, I saw Nancy coming out of the bedroom. Seeing me, she looked me up and down. Finally, her brow tightened, and her voice dripped with a faint mockery. It's not like you're missing any arms or legs. Are you really trying to frame Gavin over a little disagreement by staging a car crash? Justin, that's pathetic, you know that? I just stared at her. The coldness in her eyes now matched the face I saw at the crash site. The road had been empty, the night wind sharp and cold. But nothing was colder than the cruel indifference in Nancy's eyes as she half-carried, half-supported Gavin away from the scene. She left me there, at the site of a wreck on a deserted road. A fine, misty rain started to fall not long after. In the dead of an early winter night, the cold seeped into my bones. Before, I would have broken down afterward, demanding answers, and it would have ended in a huge fight where we both said things we regretted. But this time, facing her again, I felt an unprecedented calm. I could no longer bring myself to be torn up inside just because she favored Gavin. The last time I blew up was when I saw the two of them, who were supposed to be on a business trip, drunk and lying in the same bed. That day, I'd been rushed to the hospital after collapsing from a severe stomach flu. I called Nancy right before going into surgery, but Gavin answered. On the phone, they were both slurring their words, and I could faintly hear a man's low, strained breathing. By the time I dragged myself to that hotel after surgery, it was the next morning. When I caught them red-handed, Nancy wasn't ashamed of her mistake. Instead, she accused me of making a scene, of letting everyone know. I know perfectly well whether I slept with him or not. Gavin was exhausted from taking care of me all night. How is he supposed to face people at the office after you pulled a stunt like this? The man's repressed moans, the woman's heavy breathing, it was all still ringing in my ears. And now she was turning it around, accusing me. She always had her reasons, as if all my rage and fury were just me overreacting. It wasn't until after the crash, watching her walk away with Gavin, that something inside me finally snapped. The point of fighting is to communicate, to solve problems between two people. But between her and me, that was no longer necessary. Nancy, our wedding, before I could finish, my words were cut off by her ringtone. It was a clear, smooth male voice, singing a love song meant for only one person. Gavin's voice was distinctive, you could recognize it instantly. He had recorded it just for Nancy. Nancy, who had been frowning and looking impatient with me just a moment ago, now had a look of concern on her face as she quickly answered the phone. Is something wrong? Are you uncomfortable? A light laugh came from the other end. Hey boss, don't be so tense. I just wanted to remind you to grab some skincare products for me. Just enough for tonight at the hospital. Only then did I notice the paper bag in Nancy's hand. It was the new skincare set I had bought just a few days ago, still unopened. Nancy hung up and looked at me, her tone accusatory. If it weren't for you, he wouldn't need to be in the hospital for observation. I'll buy you another set of skincare another day. She explained patiently, as if afraid I'd give Gavin a hard time over these things again. I waved my hand generously. Don't worry about it. It's not like I'll be using them anyway. Seeing that I wasn't arguing with her like I used to, Nancy froze. She seemed confused. You're not mad? Standing for so long was making the injury on my ankle throb. A slow, sharp pain began to crawl through my body. I endured it, biting my lip and nodding. From now on, I won't get mad about anything between you and him. Nancy's face instantly turned cold. Is this fun for you? Playing these push and pull games, pretending to be so magnanimous. With that, she gave my arm a warning tug. You'd better not cause any trouble for Gavin, or else. The sudden movement sent a jolt of pain through me, and sweat beaded on my forehead. I shook off her hand and cut her off, suppressing my anger. Or else what? She always used breaking up as a threat. In the past, the mere mention of it would send me into a panic, insecure and terrified of losing her. But I don't know when it started hearing her use the same trick over and over just became boring. Maybe she saw the calmness in my eyes, because Nancy was at a loss for words. Finally, she just scoffed and grabbed her car keys, heading out the door. As soon as she left, I called a reporter I knew. If he went to the hospital tonight, he would definitely get the shot he wanted. If Nancy was bold enough to do it, she had to be ready to face the consequences. The next morning, I had just gotten out of bed when my mother called, ready to read me the riot act. The Lees just called and said the wedding is postponed. Did you piss Nancy off again? The marriage between the Lee and Dane families was a huge win for the Danes. So, ever since Nancy and I started dating, my mom had constantly warned me to keep a tight leash on her. You'd better find a way to make it up to Nancy. You made such a public spectacle of chasing her. If this wedding falls through, who in our social circle will ever want you? She wasn't afraid of a falling out with the Lees. She was afraid that after the fallout, my reputation would be ruined, I'd be unwanted, and I would lose my last bit of value. Mom, she's sleeping with someone else. The only reason she won't admit it is to save the Lee family from embarrassment. Don't you find a daughter-in-law like that disgusting? Suddenly, I heard the sound of something smashing on the other end of the line, violent, with an anger that couldn't be suppressed. Justin Dane, you listen to me. Even if Nancy ended up disabled, you committed to her from the beginning, so you will see this through and marry her. But when I first fell in love with her, I didn't know that one day things between us would become so ugly. There was no point in explaining any of this to my mom, though. As long as it benefited her, her son's marriage was just another tool for her to climb the social ladder. Whether I was happy or not was completely irrelevant. I called Nancy. When she answered, I could hear her indulgent, doting tone as she spoke to someone next to her. Stop it, let me take this call. After that, she was silent for a long time, apparently waiting for me to explode with accusations. But I was very calm. Nancy, are you coming home in the next few days? She let out a cold laugh. If you want me to come home, just say so. You don't have to beat around the bush. These cheap tricks to win my affection are pathetic. But my next words disappointed her. You'd better not come home for the next couple of days. I've hired a cleaning service to do a deep clean of the house. The place is a mess and not fit to live in. I waited for her to get angry, but instead, Nancy seemed to have gotten some other idea. Her laughter sounded almost cheerful. Are you trying to say that once the house is clean, it'll be ready for the wedding? So, she thought this was just another one of my ways of surrendering. But she seemed to be enjoying it. I couldn't be bothered to explain. Nancy, I said bluntly, I stopped looking forward to this wedding a long time ago. She suddenly went silent. Even her breathing seemed to tense up. Then, from her end of the line, I heard Gavin's voice, pretending to be alarmed. "Ow, you're hurting me." The next second, the call was abruptly disconnected. I stared at the blank screen, my heart as still as water. Before I left for work, the contractor came back to ask me one more time, looking worried. "Son, I can see that room is supposed to be the master suite for the newlyweds. It's decorated so nicely. Are you sure that's the room you want completely redone?" Telling Nancy I'd hired a cleaning service was just an excuse. I had decorated our wedding suite myself, meticulously. It only recently dawned on me that while she was sneaking around with Gavin, while she was staying out all night, I was sitting alone in an empty house, full of hope, decorating the room for our future. All those unanswered calls, all those nights she claimed to be working late, it was all so she could be with Gavin. From high school to our professional lives, from the fiery passion of young love to the present-day resentment of two people who had grown tired of each other. She was the one who betrayed this relationship first. I certainly wasn't going to leave the suite I designed for her and another man. Looking at the contractor's anxious face, I smiled faintly. The person I loved is dead. What's the point of keeping a wedding suite? A look of pity immediately flashed in the contractor's eyes. But as I left, I felt a sense of relief. The Nancy of the past was a dream I could never reach in my youth. Later, the dream came true, only to be crushed under the weight of my mother's ambitions for the family. When self-interest gets mixed up with love, it's no longer pure. It wasn't until now, after Nancy's betrayal, that I finally understood. When I was young, I craved my mother's love. When I grew up, I craved the love of another woman. But I'm realizing the person I really need to learn to love is myself. I can't control someone else's heart, so I'll control my own life. Don't pin your hopes on anyone else, only to be left with disappointment. The company signed a huge deal, so after dinner, I took the team out for karaoke. On my way to the restroom, I glanced through the glass door of a private room across the hall and immediately saw Nancy and Gavin beside her. They were competing against another couple, playing a game, eating a single Pocky stick from opposite ends, their faces inches apart. People were cheering them on, the atmosphere electric. Their eyes met, and the charged air became thick and sticky. I found it boring and was about to leave when Nancy suddenly saw me. The adoring smile froze on her face. The next second, she shoved Gavin away. I had only taken 2 steps before she burst out of the room and grabbed me. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You're allowed to hang out here, but I'm not?" Seeing my cold attitude, she explained guiltily, "It was just a silly game with friends. Don't make a scene." I nodded. "Got it. Anything else?" My willingness to let it go, the fact that my girlfriend was playing such an intimate game with someone else, clearly made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to it. "What is wrong with you? If you're upset, just say so. Don't go taking it out on Gavin later." I pushed her away, a little exasperated. "Don't worry. I won't be bothered by it anymore." Without another word, I went into my own private room. Nancy just stood there, looking lost and not moving for a long time. After our company party ended, I unexpectedly ran into Nancy in the hallway. My employees all knew about our relationship and greeted her with smiles. But Gavin, standing beside her, looked sour the entire time. Nancy insisted on driving me home, ignoring my refusals. At first, I was completely against it, but then I thought about how cold it was outside. Why not take a free ride? As we got to the car, Gavin smoothly pulled open the passenger door. "Hey Justin, I get carsick. You don't mind if I sit up front, right?" The passenger seat was always my spot. I have a bad neck, so Nancy had bought me a special neck pillow that she kept there. But at this moment, that dark blue pillow had been carelessly tossed into the back seat. In its place on the passenger seat was a dark gray throw pillow. It was Gavin's style through and through. Nancy followed my gaze and noticed it too. She quickly explained, "He left it here last time he was in the car and forgot to take it." But I didn't care. Before she could even finish, I opened the back door and got in. Nancy, standing outside the car, looked crestfallen, clearly agitated by my indifference. But as soon as I sat down, my palm touched something sticky and unfamiliar. I looked down and saw, in the storage pocket on the back of the seat, a small, torn foil packet, the kind used for personal items. The air was tinged with a strange, sweet scent. My mind went blank. I knew instantly what it was. My stomach churned, and a wave of nausea, worse than anything I'd ever felt, washed over me. By the time Nancy realized what was happening, I had already thrown the door open and flagged down a passing taxi. The cab sped off, leaving a helpless and bewildered Nancy standing there, panicking. The cab driver saw how sick I was and smelled the alcohol on my breath. Afraid I would puke in his car, he pulled over and asked me to get out. The cool night air on my face helped my shaking body gradually calm down, and my head cleared. I had already accepted the reality of the situation, so why did I have such a strong reaction just now? Just then, Nancy's calls started flooding my phone, one after another, but I didn't answer. Finally, she sent a barrage of texts. She must have realized what had happened after I got out of the car, checked the back seat, and remembered the condom wrapper. She was frantic, begging me to answer so she could explain. In her texts, she absolved herself of all blame, claiming a friend had borrowed the car a few days ago. I just replied with one sentence. I know. Who she did it with or who she lent her car to had nothing to do with me anymore. That night, Nancy avoided coming home. The next day, I got a call from the custom suit shop. They said my tailored tuxedo was ready and I could come by for a fitting. The night streets were empty, tinged with a desolate air. The suit was a design Nancy had personally helped with years ago. It might have been a bit dated, but it was precious because it was born from a time when our love was strong. They couldn't reach Nancy, so they called me. When the owner saw me walk in, his face immediately became awkward and flustered. His eyes darted nervously toward the fitting room. In the next second, I knew why. That tuxedo, the one I had once dreamed of, was now being worn by another man. And my fiancée was standing right next to him. Her gaze was a mixture of gentle admiration and a complex, deep affection. A look I had seen in Nancy's eyes before. Only back then, I was the one she was looking at. Gavin's eyes met mine over Nancy's shoulder. Instantly, as if he'd seen a monster, he leaped off the fitting platform and scurried behind Nancy in terror. Justin, don't get the wrong idea. I just thought the suit looked nice. I didn't know it was yours until after I put it on. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The two of them, out shopping, just happened to wander into this exact custom tailor. And Gavin just happened to fall in love with my suit. And by pure chance, the owner called me right then to come try it on. It was all too much of a coincidence. So much so that it felt like someone had arranged it on purpose. What was the point of all this? Did Nancy want to see me break down and cry? To watch me lose my dignity and fight with Gavin over a tuxedo? If you don't love someone anymore, just let them go with some grace. Hearing my laugh, Nancy's back visibly stiffened for a moment. When she turned around, her eyes were filled with a forced calmness. Don't get the wrong idea. All tuxedos look pretty much the same. I didn't realize it was our design until after he put it on. He's young. It's normal for him to want to try on a nice suit when he sees one. As she spoke, she subtly scanned my face, trying to find any trace of anger beneath my calm expression. She knew. She knew how much I loved the design when I first saw her sketches for the suit. I loved it so much I would sneak into the study late at night just to look at the drawings. When Nancy woke up and saw how much I adored it, she was happy too. Moonlight streamed into the dark room, and two hearts in love held each other close. I was so moved my eyes welled up, and she gently kissed away my tears. She said she would make me the happiest groom in the world. But now she had personally given that same suit to another man to wear. In that instant, I suddenly felt so tired. Even the energy to speak to her seemed to vanish. Seeing my lack of reaction, Nancy became visibly nervous. I looked at Gavin's smug face and smiled faintly. I'm glad you like it, as long as you're comfortable wearing it. My generous retreat seemed to put Nancy on edge. She grabbed my arm as I was about to turn away, her eyes filled with disbelief and anxiety. Her voice was even a little unsteady. Justin, why aren't you angry? I thought about it seriously for a moment, and then it hit me. Maybe it's because I just don't care anymore. Because the love was gone, I no longer wanted to care about anything related to her. Love arrived like a thunderstorm, but it vanished without a sound. Unexpectedly, Nancy left Gavin standing there in the tuxedo, flustered and helpless, being scrutinized by the disdainful looks of the shop staff. He looked like a clown, a lot like the old me. Inside the enclosed car, Nancy's stiff expression betrayed a strange tension. When I didn't say anything, she, for once, took the initiative to explain. I just didn't want the car accident to blow up. I was just placating him to keep things quiet. So she still didn't believe me when I said it was Gavin who suddenly appeared and slammed into my driver's side door. When I didn't respond, she grew anxious. I know you're still mad about the hotel incident. I promise you that night, Gavin was just taking care of me because I was drunk. Nothing else happened. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. Even if something did happen between them, it would make sense. Nancy indulged Gavin's provocations against me, blatantly showing him favoritism. She was just unwilling to admit to herself that her heart had changed. However, she couldn't seem to bear my silence. She slammed her hand on the horn, and the sudden, piercing blast made my heart jump. When I turned to look at her, I was met with a pair of red-rimmed eyes, like an animal cornered and desperate. Why aren't you yelling? Justin, why aren't you demanding answers? What was there to ask? Every time, Nancy had a different excuse. She was always so calm, like a bystander coolly observing my pathetic, hysterical breakdowns. In the end, after she had pushed me to the brink of collapse, she would just casually say, "Justin, don't make a big deal out of nothing." How could the stubbornness of loving someone be nothing? I looked her straight in the eye, my heart so calm that I started to wonder why Nancy looked so miserable right now. Ask you what? You have a different reason every time. I'm tired. I don't have the energy to care who you love anymore. Nancy, who had been looking at me with a flicker of hope, suddenly deflated. She seemed to notice that the burning passion that once filled my eyes when I looked at her was gone, replaced by a numb, dead stillness. She suddenly threw her arms around me, holding me tight, not even daring to look me in the eye. Her voice was like that of a trapped, helpless animal, trembling slightly. It's not supposed to be like this. Justin, you love me more than anyone. Your mom pulled every trick in the book to make sure you married me. Your whole family can't wait to trade you for their own gain. But why is the look in your eyes so calm? So calm that I can't feel a single trace of love or care. I knew that Nancy's growing coldness towards me was related to my mother's insatiable greed. Love mixed with self-interest becomes impure. But two people who are truly in love won't be torn apart by worldly desires. You don't get hurt because the love is gone, but because there wasn't enough love to begin with. After a long moment, I said softly, "Nancy, you felt it before. You felt my most passionate, purest love. Because you truly felt what it was like to be loved, you could instantly feel the loss when it was gone. Just like how one morning, I suddenly realized that Nancy hadn't kissed me and told me she loved me before leaving the house in a very, very long time. And I no longer left a light on for her, waiting up late into the night. Our conversation was cut short by Gavin knocking on the car window. In the early winter weather, Gavin wasn't wearing his jacket, just holding it in his arms. His thin frame looked frail, giving him a sort of sickly vulnerability. His eyes were brimming with tears. "Boss, it's all my fault for causing this misunderstanding between you and Justin." The Gavin right now was a completely different person from the one who secretly provoked me on the phone. I coldly watched his self-directed drama. After speaking, he turned to me, his eyes full of innocent tears. "Justin, if yelling at me will make you feel better, you can yell at me, hit me, whatever." Smack. I didn't hesitate to slap him across the face. His handsome, fair face immediately became red and swollen. Nancy shoved me away like a madwoman. "Justin, are you crazy? What did you hit him for?" I stood there silently. A sharp, clear pain shot through my ankle, and in that moment, I made a firm decision. "Nancy, admitting you don't love me anymore isn't shameful. What's despicable is being a coward like you, who doesn't love me but doesn't have the guts to admit it. Because our 10 years of love were real, it felt as if whoever gave up first would be the loser in this relationship." Nancy had been pushing me, pushing me to admit that we were no longer in love, while still deceiving herself and pretending she still loved me, just like she did a moment ago. Her face was grim, and she looked like she wanted to say something more, but my next words made her face turn paler than ever before. Nancy, lucky for me, I don't love you anymore either. The next morning, I was packing my bags. A local courier delivered the tuxedo from last night and a note. The suit has been cleaned. The wedding will proceed as scheduled. But something that's been tainted is disgusting, even if you hold on to it. Besides, I didn't go there last night to try on the suit. I went to reclaim a piece of my past, to prevent them from soiling it. The pristine white tuxedo symbolized the most beautiful love I ever had. Those memories were part of my youth, a vibrant and significant chapter of my life. But Nancy destroyed it all. I took a pair of scissors and personally cut the tuxedo to shreds. The tattered pieces of fabric fell to the floor, like the most beautiful dream of my youth. Now it was time to wake up. Before I left with my suitcase, I posted an update on my social feed. Wedding canceled. Here's to my new life. Watching the red notification dots light up my screen, I calmly turned off my phone. But thinking about the big gift I was about to send Nancy in a few days filled me with a faint sense of anticipation. As the car turned into the neighborhood, it passed a figure pulling a suitcase. Sitting in the car, Nancy felt a sudden pang in her heart. A strong sense of unease welled up from deep inside, a feeling that something important was about to disappear, coupled with a helpless, frustrating inability to grasp it. What came to mind was Justin's calm, empty gaze. Because she had stared directly into his most intense love, she could spot the abnormality in an instant. She was terrified. She was anxious. That's why last night, when she watched Justin leave, she didn't even have the courage to chase after him and ask questions. She kept telling herself that once they were married, she would change and everything would be fine. As soon as she arrived at the house, she saw that it was in a state of chaos. A contractor was carrying things out the door, and she was puzzled. Maria, the housekeeper, was also surprised to see her. "Miss, why are you back? Mr. Dane said you wouldn't be back for a few days, so we haven't had a chance to clean up yet." Hearing Mr. Dane, the unease in her heart suddenly dissipated. The corners of her mouth softened unconsciously. "Where is he?" Maria paused. "You didn't run into him? Mr. Dane just left." Before she could think further, she saw a contractor come out of the bedroom carrying 2 new table lamps. It was only then that Nancy realized why everything had felt wrong since she walked in. "Who told you to touch those?" Justin had specifically bought those 2 lamps, saying they would put them on the nightstands after they were married. In the dead of night, when all was quiet, the 2 warm, yellow lights would illuminate a world that belonged only to them. A pair of lamps, a pair of people. But now, those 2 lamps were being thrown out like trash, just like their relationship. The 2 contractors, seeing her well-dressed, were suddenly at a loss, afraid of causing trouble. They quickly explained. "The man of the house told us. He said the person he loved died, so he doesn't want anything from the wedding suite. He told us to do whatever we want with it during the renovation." Those words hit Nancy like a sledgehammer. Her heart stopped, and her mind went blank for a second. She stumbled into what was supposed to be their wedding suite. But the room was now completely transformed. There was no trace of joyful celebration anywhere. Justin had designed the suite. His excitement and happiness, the visible thrill when he held the design plans, it was all so precious. Because he loved her, he had poured his heart into planning every detail of their wedding. But now the entire room had become unfamiliar. Even the air didn't smell the same. All traces of Justin had been thoroughly erased from this room, and she was too late to even stop it. She let out a sound like a wild, out-of-control animal, a sound that was horrifying to hear. "Who told you to touch this room? Who gave you permission to touch anything?" Nancy was frantic, shoving away a contractor who was taking down the curtains. Her eyes darted around, desperately searching for something familiar in the room. But it seemed intentional. Every detail of the room had been changed. The room she and Justin had shared for 5 years was completely transformed. It had become strange, terrifying. Just then, her phone rang. Her mother's anger was palpable even through the phone. What on earth is wrong with that Justin? Everything was fine, so why did he post on social media that the wedding is canceled? I warned you, if you want to get married, don't threaten him with breaking up. And you just had to go and complain to his mother. Everyone knew how strict Justin's mother was with him. He had excelled at everything since he was a child, strictly following his mother's demands, all to avoid her scolding and beatings. The only time Justin ever rebelled was at his high school graduation, when he publicly declared his love for her. His mother, feeling she had lost face and fearing it would ruin future marriage alliances with other prominent families, beat Justin so badly he was covered in bruises and locked him in the house for days. It wasn't until Nancy repeatedly assured her that she and Justin were in love and would get married right after graduation that his mother finally relented. Their relationship was the result of their joint efforts. But so many years after graduation, her promise remained unfulfilled. Nancy clutched her aching heart and sank to her knees. She knew that Justin had defied the mother he had feared his whole life for her sake. For her, he had crossed lines and done things he would never have done before. And yet, because she was tired of his mother's constant demands, she had questioned Justin's love for her. So, she began to test him, pushing him away again and again without any limits, just to prove that he loved her. It seemed she had lost the person who loved her most. So what Justin said on the phone that day wasn't a joke. He really wasn't looking forward to their wedding anymore. A few days later, I turned my phone back on, and a call from my mother came through. I could imagine the trouble my social media post had caused for both the Lee and Dane families. But that had nothing to do with me anymore. My mother had already made a fortune through her partnership with the Lees via my engagement, but she never knew when to stop. As for the Lees, they should blame Nancy. She couldn't have it both ways, protecting her reputation while expecting me to bear a responsibility that wasn't mine. I answered my mother's call, and as expected, it was a tirade of abuse. She called me ungrateful, a traitor to the Dane family. Even my two brothers took the opportunity to vent their frustrations with me over the phone. They had climbed on my back to get close to the Lees, and now they were blaming me for being selfish. You're almost 30, still chasing some teenage dream of love. What woman doesn't make a mistake when she's tempted? You should be grateful she was even willing to marry you. I looked down at my slightly swollen ankle and couldn't help but feel that after all these years, I was only just now starting to understand life. In this world, the people who hurt me the most have always been my own family. Fortunately, it wasn't too late to wake up. My two brothers and I grew up under our mother's high-pressure control. Surviving in a constant state of competition, the coldness of our family life had long ago forced me to build a suit of armor. You too have plenty of women on the side. When your interests are on the line, it's only natural you'd empathize with your own kind. Finally, I gave them a piece of friendly advice. You'd better not hope for this marriage alliance to continue. Pull out of any projects related to the Lees now. Cut your losses while you can. After hanging up, I immediately called my best friend, Cody, who's a social media influencer. The dashcam footage from the car crash has been compiled. I let out a huge sigh of relief. You know what to do next. As long as public opinion is completely on my side, it'll be worth all the frustration I've been holding back since the crash. After I finished, Cody couldn't help but complain over the phone. I think you need to be careful. In the few days you've been gone, Nancy has been looking for you all over the world like she's lost her mind. I thought that when faced with questions from both our family's elders, Nancy would surely blame me for everything. But she had taken all the responsibility on herself. She even made excuses for me, saying I was suffering from pre-wedding anxiety. She claimed that once I came back from my trip, the wedding would go on as planned. According to Cody, in order to find out where I was, Nancy, who was normally so cold, arrogant, and looked down on everyone, had actually humbled herself to wait outside my friends' houses. She dropped her pride, begging for information over and over, not even caring when people were rude to her. When I was the one trying to hold on, she was dismissive. Now she's putting on this act of deep love. I understand Nancy less and less. I had rented a new apartment before I decided to leave, so Nancy didn't know the address. All she could do was tirelessly call me again and again. When I finally answered, her voice on the other end was ecstatic yet cautious. "Justin, you finally answered my call." I thought about how I used to be completely devoted to her, only to be ignored time and time again. Now the roles were reversed, and Nancy seemed to have become the insecure, desperate person I used to be. "Nancy, do you have any idea how annoying you are?" She was instantly choked up, her voice laced with humility. "These past few days you've been gone. I've realized how terribly wrong I was. Please believe me, nothing happened between me and Gavin. I was just scared that what people said was true, that you were only with me for the money. So I tested you, again and again, just to be sure of my place in your heart." I couldn't help but laugh. "And now you're sure that I really don't love you anymore?" Nancy hurriedly cut me off. "No, that's not it. I know you love me. I just used the wrong method." Nancy, self-deception on this level is just stupidity. Stupid and completely unaware, still pleased with herself. After hanging up, I opened up TikTok. The postponed wedding had already made the Lee and Dane families infamous online. Netizens were all speculating about the real story. Some sleuths even dug up all the little details of my 10-year relationship with Nancy. From high school sweethearts to the brink of marriage, our long-running love story was naturally a goldmine for media attention. Of course, now I was adding fuel to the fire, making the topic skyrocket in popularity. The video Cody mentioned was footage I had paid a hefty sum for from other cars at the scene of the crash that night. My car had a dashcam too, but a third-person perspective was the most damning. Gavin always thought the location was remote enough that there were no cameras, but he didn't know that the only way to keep a secret is to not do it in the first place. In the footage, he suddenly darts out from a corner, not even turning the wheel, and rams straight into my driver's side door. He must have valued his life because he slammed on the brakes right before impact. But that clip was enough to cause a massive uproar online. Immediately after, a reporter released videos of Nancy and Gavin entering and leaving a hotel and a hospital together. And then there was footage of me dragging my injured body in and out of the hospital all alone. It confirmed all the netizens' suspicions. I instantly transformed from a reckless rich kid into a pitiful man abandoned by his lover and ignored by his family. At the same time, my company's newly established brand was officially announced online. For a time, the internet was flooded with news about it. This was far more effective than any paid advertising campaign. The next time I saw Nancy was half a month later. After being questioned by the police, Gavin was also facing a lawsuit from me. In a desperate attempt to get Nancy to save him, he resorted to emotionally blackmailing her with Liam, the child he had with his ex-girlfriend, Sarah. In a fit of rage, Nancy took him to court as well. This social circle has always been messy, but everyone usually does a good job of hiding their dirty laundry. Everyone except Nancy, the former ice queen, the famously elegant and untouchable heiress of her circle, had become a complete laughingstock. But she didn't seem to care. After trying every possible way, she finally found my new address. It was raining that night. Under the dim yellow streetlights, Nancy's figure looked utterly wretched, and for a moment, I saw a reflection of myself when she had abandoned me. When she spoke, her voice was raspy to the extreme. "Justin, I know I was wrong. I was really drunk that night. I swear I didn't touch Gavin. You can punish me however you want. Just don't ignore me." I stood blocking the doorway, afraid she would try to force her way in. I didn't want my new home to be tainted by any trace of Nancy. It's a good thing we didn't get married. Otherwise, with you dragging me down like this, I'd never be able to date anyone. I was deliberately trying to provoke her, thinking she would fly into a rage. But instead, Nancy just grabbed my hand, looking terrified and helpless. "I know you're mad at me. I've already sent Gavin to prison. If that's not enough to make you feel better, you can punish me however you want. Justin, the house without you isn't a home. It's like a cold prison. I finally understand the loneliness you faced on all those nights I didn't come home." With that, she burst into tears. The person who was always so composed and calm was now sobbing quietly, like a lost and helpless child. I shook off her hand and looked at her with disgust. Nancy, do you know what the first thought that went through my head was when I saw you and Gavin in that bed together? Nancy seemed to realize what I was about to say, and her stiff body trembled violently. As I spoke, her already haggard face turned pale, shade by shade. So dirty. You're so dirty, Nancy. I could never forget that image for the rest of my life. Regardless of whether anything happened between her and Gavin, her attitude at that moment was not that of a normal person. She knew she was wrong, yet she could still brazenly cover for herself. It was as if her last ounce of courage had been depleted. Nancy began to lose control. Of course I know I'm unforgivable, but what am I supposed to do? I don't want to lose you. I would rather die than be apart from you. Her emotions escalated, and even the way she looked at me changed, like a predator sizing up its exclusive prey. And in the next moment, she acted on it. She threw her arms around me, recklessly pulling me into an embrace, pressing her head into the crook of my neck as hot tears soaked my collar. I will never forget the Justin who confessed his love to me when I was 18. He was like a beam of light that shone into my life. I know I will never meet another Justin in this lifetime. So either you kill me or we die together. Otherwise, I will never, ever be apart from you. But the Justin who loved her most had already been destroyed by her own hands. Finally, I grabbed the vase from the entryway and smashed it over her head. Blood gushed out instantly, soaking both of our clothes. Nancy still held on, refusing to let go. Eventually, a neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. The police had to separate us. As they took her away, the look of shattered despair in her eyes seemed to acknowledge that there was no longer any possibility between us. With the marriage alliance between the Lee and Dane families off the table, and after the Lees pulled their business, my mother and brothers suffered heavy losses. As I blocked my mother's incoming calls, I was getting ready to board a plane for a trip abroad. Free from the shackles my family had placed on me, even breathing felt easier. After the plane landed, I got a call from my friend, Cody. He said that after the police took Nancy away that night and sent her to the hospital, they found a tumor in her brain. My blow to her head had inadvertently led to an early discovery of the hidden illness. However, the doctors had already diagnosed it as mid to late stage. Even with treatment, she wouldn't live long. I thought I would be sad. After all, it was a human life. But on the way to the hotel, I couldn't help but fall into deep thought. A lover who betrayed you, or a lover who is about to die? Which one is harder to forget? My thoughts were interrupted by the driver, who was describing the beautiful scenery along the way in broken English. In that moment, the chaotic thoughts in my mind suddenly became clear. Life is so short, why worry about things that have already happened or have yet to happen? But life is also very long. Looking back, you'll find that the things that once troubled you will one day become the most insignificant pains of your life. I know that I am the most precious thing in my own life, and that's enough.